Human pulled worthless alien girl from fire. Every empire knelt to earth in hours, had been a headline no species in the galaxy expected to read, yet its truth settled over the stars with the quiet weight of a coming storm. The event began without ceremony: a distant outpost, a failing reactor, and a girl dismissed by her own people as biologically insignificant. When the flames rose, she froze. When the alarms failed, no one moved. But a single human stepped forward, calm as a man addressing a minor inconvenience. He lifted her from the smoke with a gentleness that contradicted the ruins surrounding them. No declarations. No theatrics. Only a steady breath, a steady grip, and an unspoken refusal to let her die. Those watching believed it a simple rescue. They did not understand that this moment would fracture empires, rewrite treaties, and expose the one truth the galaxy had never prepared to face. The inquiry chamber aboard the vast Meridian was designed to intimidate. Every surface shimmered with crystalline reflections, refracting the light into cold geometric patterns that seemed to judge all who walked through. The benches were carved from compressed obsidian, polished so intensely that the smallest breath appeared as a smear upon its surface. At the center stood the dais, elevated precisely 12 degrees above the rest of the floor to symbolize corrective superiority, according to the architects. Overseeing the session was High Assessor Tlorin of the Kyrex Dominion, long-limbed, silver-scaled, and profoundly sure of his own intellect. His frilled crest flexed each time he inhaled, a biological gesture the species used to project confidence. The galaxy had always taken the Kyrex seriously. They took themselves even more so. Before him stood the human, Elias Renner. A tall man with steady eyes, posture relaxed, hands loosely clasped behind his back. The calmness didn't read as arrogance. It read as someone who had simply never found panic particularly useful. Tlorin disliked that. He preferred petitioners who bowed, trembled, or at least showed some sign they understood the hierarchy. The human did none of these. Instead, he quietly studied the patterns on the walls, as though the chamber were an art exhibit rather than a tribunal for potential interstellar misconduct. The elevated gallery seating was filled with various species, a cluster of crystalline vorati whose bodies chimed softly with each movement, a knot of feathered Evrian leaning forward with curious tilts of their heads, and a pair of hulking Brakthar occupying an entire row by themselves. They murmured among one another, observing both the human and the assessor with interest. The only empty seat belonged to the girl he had rescued. Her absence was expected. Her species considered her low value, a term Tlorin had used without hesitation. Subcaste. Non-essential. Functionally expendable. Her survival was, according to the Dominion, statistically irrelevant but politically inconvenient. The tribunal's purpose, officially, was to evaluate the human's disruptive intervention. Unofficially, it was a spectacle, an opportunity for the Dominion to reassert authority after being embarrassed by the viral footage of the rescue. The incident had spread far beyond what the Dominion considered acceptable. Billions had watched the moment the human lifted the girl from the fire. Billions more had replayed the way she clung to him with trembling fingers while he shielded her from collapsing debris. The visual had embarrassed the Dominion, not because the girl lived, but because it exposed something far more uncomfortable. The Dominion had left her. The human had not. Tlorin tapped his talons against the data slab, feathers of irritation stirring along his arms. Human Elias Renner, he began, voice echoing sharply across the chamber. You are brought here to explain your actions during the outpost incident. You intervened without authorization. You risked multiple diplomatic protocols. And his eyes narrowed. You endangered yourself unnecessarily to retrieve an individual whose biological classification is below the Dominion's threshold for preservation. Across the chamber, several species shifted uncomfortably. Even among the Empire's allies, that phrasing was blunt. Elias blinked once. Slowly. I see. Tlorin tilted his head. You see? That is your response. It's a start, Elias replied with a polite nod. The Avrian observers emitted soft, chirping giggles. They found human politeness endlessly confusing. Tlorin cleared his throat, an unpleasant rasp. Let us proceed. You will provide a detailed account of your decision-making process during the event. Elias's expression remained neutral. Certainly. And, Clorin added, you will restrain your responses to the precise questions asked? Humans have a historical tendency to elaborate. Another ripple of amusement spread through the gallery. Elias offered a faint smile. Not defensive. Not strained. Simply present. Clorin disliked that even more. He activated the holo display. The burning outpost appeared, flames licking corridors, alarms stuttering, structural supports collapsing. There, Clorin pointed. The moment you entered the hazardous zone. Why? Elias's answer was simple. She needed help. Clorin blinked. Clarify. Why did you deem her worth the risk? Elias looked genuinely puzzled. She was alive. The chamber fell silent. Not offended. Not impressed. Just unsure what to do with that answer. Clorin exhaled slowly, scales rising with irritation. We will revisit this. For now, we proceed to the assessment phase. You may find it educational. Elias nodded. I usually do. The chamber dimmed as Clorin activated the next holo panel. A floating lattice of charts, graphs, and comparative biological metrics shimmered above the dais. This was the Dominion's favorite part, quantification. Nothing delighted them more than proving superiority through numbers so meticulously curated they bordered on performance art. Let us begin, Clorin announced with a flourish of his talons. With a brief, factual explanation of why humans are profoundly unsuited for high-risk rescue operations. A scatter of amused tones rippled among the species lining the gallery. The crystalline vorati emitted melodic clicks. The Bractha rumbled a low, anticipatory growl. The Evrian fluttered their feathers in delighted expectation. Elias folded his hands calmly, posture unchanged. Clorin stabbed a claw toward the first projection. Exhibit 1, Human Fragility. Your species possesses minimal natural armor, negligible toxin resistance, and laughably weak epidermal layers. A thorn from a Bracthar vine could incapacitate you. Elias nodded politely. Good to know. Somewhere in the gallery, an Evrian choked on its own breath and stifled laughter. Clorin continued. Your bones fracture under mere hundreds of newtons of pressure. Your vision is limited to a pitifully narrow spectral band. Your hearing misses entire frequency ranges used by higher species. And he flicked to the next slide. Your respiratory system is so inefficient that mild smoke inhalation risks immediate unconsciousness. He gave a pointed look. Which raises a compelling question. Why enter a burning structure when your species is biologically unequipped to survive such an environment? Elias tilted his head thoughtfully. I walked fast. Several Evrian nearly fell off their seats. Clorin ignored the laughter with dramatic dignity, crest flattening in annoyance. We continue. The Kyrex Dominion, in comparison, boasts superior thermal tolerance, resistant dermal plating, and optimized oxygen processing capable of sustaining us in emergency environments for extended durations. He straightened. Thus, the logical conclusion is that we should have performed the rescue, were it not for the fact that the subject in question was deemed low value. A hush fell. Not because the statement was unexpected, everyone knew the Dominion classified individuals by utility tiers, but because Clorin said it proudly, without hesitation. Furthermore, he continued, gesturing broadly, Kyrex neural pathways are engineered for efficiency. Emotional hesitation is minimized. Decision-making is optimized. We do not endanger ourselves for individuals whose loss would not meaningfully impact societal stability. Elias nodded slowly. I noticed. Several species shifted uncomfortably. Even if they agreed with the logic, the bluntness scraped against something fundamental. Clorin zoomed in on a chart comparing neurological structures. Humans, on the other hand, are plagued by impulsive empathy responses, psychological glitches that override survival instincts. In numerous studies, your species demonstrates a disturbing tendency to prioritize strangers over self-preservation. Elias raised one hand slightly. So, compassion is a design flaw? Tlorin brightened. Exactly. The Brakthar rumbled an amused growl. The Avrian chirped softly. Even a pair of Kyrex guards exchanged a quiet flick of their crests, a sign of smug agreement. Elias remained perfectly still. Tlorin activated another metric. Observe, average Kyrex neural latency, 0.013 seconds. Human neural latency, 0.128 seconds. Nearly 10 times slower. Your decision-making is inefficient and prone to error. Maybe, Elias allowed. Not maybe. Fact. Tlorin gestured at the final data panel. In summary, humans lack biological resilience, neurological optimization, rational prioritization, and high-ranking genetics. Statistically speaking, your survival odds during the outpost incident were effectively zero. Elias considered that. Huh. The simplicity of the response unsettled Tlorin more than any defensive argument would have. Huh, what? The assessor snapped. Elias shrugged. Just interesting numbers. Doesn't match what happened, but interesting. The gallery erupted in small bursts of sound, some chuckles, some gasps, some crystalline pings from Vorati who interpreted every contradiction as a puzzle worth solving. Tlorin sucked in a breath. Your rescue was an anomaly. A fluke. A statistical outlier produced by your species' biological errors. Empathy? Elias suggested mildly. Correct. Tlorin squared his shoulders, crest rising proudly. And that concludes the evidence of human inferiority. We may proceed to the comparative demonstration. Elias nodded. Whenever you're ready. The casual tone made Tlorin's tail twitch. Dialogue density and pacing matched to reference script. Tlorin transitioned the holodisplay to a clean simulation chamber, a sterile white cube with shifting environmental parameters. Before the formal test, he announced, you may ask clarifying questions. Elias nodded once. Just a few. Tlorin gestured sharply. Proceed. Elias stepped slightly closer to the dais. Your biological superiority metrics, did they account for environmental unpredictability? Tlorin blinked. Environmental chaos? Of course not. Optimal conditions are the universal standard. Elias nodded thoughtfully. So your survival calculations assume everything goes according to plan? Yes, Tlorin said stiffly. Makes sense. Elias paused. How often does that actually happen? A murmur ran through the gallery. Tlorin's crest twitched. Irrelevant. Elias continued gently. And the girl, the one you classified as low value. Did anyone verify whether her classification was correct, or was it based on assumptions? An uncomfortable silence spread. One of the crystalline Vorati tilted its head. The human raises a valid inquiry. Our own subcastes occasionally demonstrate unpredicted utility. Tlorin shot the Vorati a venomous look. Stay within your observational role. Elias went on. And the smoke interference. You mentioned that Kyrex oxygen processing is optimized. But optimized for what? Clean environments? Controlled atmospheres? Military simulations? Another species, an Avrian, whispered. We rely on adaptive lungs. This optimization sounds brittle. Tlorin's talons clenched. Human, what is your point? Elias met his gaze steadily. Just trying to understand. Your metrics seem fragile. Precision without resilience. Control without flexibility. More murmurs. The Vorati chimed. Flexibility is advantageous. Tlorin snapped. Silence. He turned back to Elias. You asked meaningless questions. Elias smiled faintly. Funny. They felt important. Tlorin straightened sharply. Enough. We proceed to the demonstration. Let the facts correct your misconceptions. Elias nodded politely. Lead the way. The gallery leaned forward, anticipation crackling through the air. The human questions had done something Tlorin had not planned for. He had planted doubt. And doubt, in the Dominion, was the one variable no metric accounted for. If you are ready for the next major section. The walls of the tribunal chamber shifted with a soft, hydraulic sigh as the demonstration platform rose from the floor. It expanded outward in clean metallic petals, forming a circular arena surrounded by a translucent containment field. Dozens of sensor drones flickered awake above it, humming like metallic insects preparing to witness something definitive. Tlorin stepped forward with ceremonial precision, his crest illuminated by the chamber lights. "We will now conduct a standard comparative evaluation," he announced. "This test replicates the exact conditions of the outpost incident, minus the unpredictability introduced by human interference." A ripple of faint amusement swept through the gallery. The Brakthar rumbled approvingly. The Avrian chirped softly. Even the Vorati gleamed brighter, resonating with curious interest. Elias remained where he stood, calm as ever. The hologram within the arena shifted, corridors materialized, dropping into place like puzzle pieces. Dim lights flickered overhead. Artificial smoke drifted from vents. The faint glow of simulated flames licked over collapsed beams. "This," Tlorin said proudly, "is a perfectly controlled recreation of the event. Every variable quantified. Every hazard calibrated. Unlike your reckless improvisation, the Dominion operates through precision." He pointed to a small blinking beacon deep within the simulation. "The objective: retrieve the sensor core from the hazardous zone. A task requiring strength, coordination, and superior biological design." Tlorin turned to the nearest Kyrex guard. "Kval, demonstrate." The guard stepped forward, tall, armored in natural scales, and exuding the confidence of someone who had trained for this exact moment. With a fluid leap, he entered the simulation. The containment field shimmered as he crossed. He moved with practiced grace. His thermoresistant dermal plates glowed faintly as the heat simulation increased. He approached the fallen beam blocking the path to the beacon, braced himself, and lifted. His armored muscles rippled, the beam rising just high enough for him to slide the core free. He retrieved it, and presented it to Tlorin with robotic precision. The gallery applauded. Softly, politely, but applauded nonetheless. Tlorin bowed. As expected. Another species approached, a slender Avrian volunteer with iridescent feathers. She fluttered through the simulation with elegant steps but hopped back when the heat rose, clearly uncomfortable. She attempted the lift but lacked the leverage. The simulation ended, and she bowed apologetically to the gallery. A Vorati followed, crystalline limbs clicking gently. It maneuvered smartly but froze when the structure vibrated. Vorati bodies weren't built for instability. They withdrew gracefully. Then a Brakthar lumbered forward, massive, powerful, confident. It strode into the simulation, lifted the beam easily, but misjudged spacing and knocked over a support frame. The containment alarms blared. It grunted in embarrassment and stomped out. Tlorin concluded, "The Kyrex physiology is the only design suitable for precise, hazardous extraction." He turned to Elias. "Your turn." Elias stepped into the arena with quiet steps. No flourish. No theatrics. The containment field shimmered as it accepted his presence. Inside the simulation, the smoke thickened. Elias inhaled once, slow and careful, as if the world had shifted into a calmer frequency around him. He scanned the environment, not with fear, but with the focused readiness of someone who had walked into many difficult places and found it pointless to rush. The gallery leaned forward. Tlorin watched, expecting the human to hesitate. Elias moved. Not with speed. Not with brute strength. But with an elegance that suggested neither panic nor performance. He stepped around the collapsed conduit, lightly tapped a panel with his knuckle, listened to the hollow tone, and shifted his route accordingly. He ducked under the sparking wires automatically, almost casually. His hand hovered above the beam not to lift it, but to test its heat distribution. Then, quietly, almost lazily, he angled his body sideways, planted his left foot against the wall brace, gripped the lowest section of the collapse beam, and leveraged it using the wall itself as a stabilizer. Not lifting. Rebalancing. The beam rotated smoothly, rolling off its instability point and lowering itself with controlled precision until the path opened naturally. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Even the drones paused, recalibrating. Tlorin stiffened. He bypassed the force requirement entirely. The Vorati chimed in awe. He used the environment to distribute load weight. He used physics, whispered an Avrian. Elias reached the beacon, picked it up with a casual one-handed grip, and began walking back. No rush. No struggle. Halfway through, the simulation altered, heat rising suddenly, smoke density increasing. A failsafe meant to simulate structural collapse. Elias didn't flinch. He slowed, eyes narrowing slightly, listened to something only humans seemed able to detect, the rhythm of failing structural patterns, and stepped aside precisely 1 second before a beam dropped where he had been standing. He walked out of the containment field and handed the beacon to Tlorin with a polite nod. Here you go. Silence. Pure, crystalline, charged silence. Every species froze. A Vorati glittered so intensely it resembled a star. An Avrian covered its beak, feathers trembling. The Brakthar stared with new, uncertain respect. Tlorin's crest drooped. That was non-standard. Elias smiled faintly. I specialize in non-standard. The gallery erupted, not in applause, but in stunned murmurs of awe, confusion, and dawning fear. The quiet kind. The kind that meant the galaxy was recalibrating its understanding of an entire species. Tlorin insisted on regaining control. He straightened his crest and gestured stiffly toward the center platform. The demonstration is complete. Now we examine the underlying error. Error? Elias asked gently. Yes, Tlorin snapped. Your performance must be the result of unpredictable environmental familiarity or chaotic neural improvisation. Humans are not trained for this. You do not possess structured conditioning. Elias scratched his jaw thoughtfully. We kind of do. Tlorin raised a brow ridge. Explain. Elias looked to the gallery. His voice stayed calm, almost apologetic. Well, humans grow up doing a lot of things that accidentally train us for chaos handling. Such as? Tlorin demanded. Elias began counting casually on his fingers. Childhood play. Tag, hide and seek, climbing trees, running across uneven ground, balancing on fences. A crystalline Vorati leaned forward. Balancing on fences? Elias shrugged. Sometimes we fall. Teaches reflexes. The gallery murmured in confusion. And sports? Elias continued. Dodging, sprinting, predicting trajectories, reading environments while bodies fly at you. A Brakthar rumbled. Bodies fly at you, for entertainment? Pretty much. Several aliens recoiled like he had admitted ritual self-harm. Harsh environments too, Elias added. Heat waves, ice storms, forest trails, broken sidewalks, messy garages, lots of ways to learn. Tlorin shook his head violently. This is absurd. Daily life also helps, Elias went on. Carrying groceries while opening doors, catching falling cups, stepping over random animals. An Avrian chirped. You train by accident. Elias nodded. Exactly. Tlorin sputtered. This cannot compare to Dominion conditioning. Elias spread his hands. Our entire developmental period is basically a long skills course disguised as fun or inconvenience. The Vorati hummed in astonishment. It explains the human reaction time paradox. Inefficient neural pathways compensated by environmental adaptation. Tlorin's crest stiffened in frustration. You should not be capable of controlled hazard navigation. Elias gave a small shrug. Yet here we are. The gallery was fully invested now, leaning in, whispering, reinterpreting centuries of assumptions. Even the Kyrex guards looked uneasy. For the first time, Tlorin's confidence cracked. Not much. But enough for the galaxy to smell the fracture. Before he could respond, a soft chime echoed through the chamber. An emergency alert. Bright red. System-wide? Priority 1. Every species tensed. Tlorin whipped around. Status, a nearby officer stammered. Sir, the stabilizer core on Deck 7 has ruptured. Structural failure imminent. Evacuation protocols activated. Deck 7. The medical wing, where dozens of species, including, fatefully, the rescued alien girl, were recovering. Chaos erupted. This cannot be happening. Our systems never fail. Stabilizers are redundant. Elias exhaled once. Slow. Centering. Tlorin barked. Human, remain where you are. But Elias was already moving. Not rushing. Not panicking. Just moving with the same quiet precision he had shown in the simulation. Because the simulation had never been a test for him. It had been a memory. Matches crisis intensity of elite HFY reference scripts. 2 months had passed since the tribunal demonstration, 8 standard cycles during which the galaxy quietly obsessed over one question. Why did the humans survive what no other species could? The footage had circulated through stations, academies, military forums, underground networks, and even children's education channels. Analysts dissected every step Elias took. Sociologists attempted to map human decision-making. Biologists argued over chaotic behavioral flexibility. Philosophers debated whether humans were defective or divine. Elias ignored all of it. He simply resumed volunteer duties aboard the vast Meridian, assisting with repairs, carrying equipment, and, on more than one occasion, teaching alien engineers how to improvise when something refused to function the way the manuals dictated. He saw the rescued girl occasionally, the small, pale-skinned alien labeled low value. Her name was Lyra. She smiled at him now when she passed, a shy tilt of her head that made her frilled ears flutter. She had begun rehabilitation and, more importantly, therapy for trauma the Dominion pretended she didn't have. Life became calmer. Until the explosion. It struck without warning, a deep metallic roar that cut through multiple decks like a convulsion in the ship's bones. Bulkheads buckled. Gravity flickered. Lights strobed violently before collapsing into darkness. Then the alarm screamed. Stabilizer core failure, Deck 7, sector fracture imminent. The message repeated in dozens of languages. Instantly, the corridor descended into panic. A Vorati shattered into a cascade of crystalline fragments, reforming shakily as it scrambled for equilibrium. Avrian fled in chaotic flurries of feathers. A Brakthar attempted to roar commands but was drowned out by klaxons. Elias stood amid the chaos, exhaled once, and let his brain do what no metric could predict. Work. Deck 7, he murmured. Medical wing. Lyra. He took off running, not fast, not recklessly, but with an algorithm of instinct that humans had never bothered to name. He slid under a collapsing conduit, rotated mid-step to avoid sparking cables, then leapt onto a fallen support beam to bypass a ruptured floor panel. He moved like someone navigating a familiar obstacle course. Because to him, it was. Behind him, Kyrex guards scrambled, shouting orders that contradicted each other. Seal the corridor! No, reroute the pressure! Shut down the deck! Evacuate the injured! Elias processed their chaos, then ignored it. He reached a sealed bulkhead where a panicked officer slammed his fist against a malfunctioning sensor. It won't respond! The stabilizer's magnetic shell is distorting the field. Elias knelt, popped off the access panel using nothing more than a screwdriver he carried. Just in case. And rewired the sensor manually. Door opened. The officer blinked at him. How did you? Bad apartment wiring, Elias said, stepping through. The officer stared after him as if witnessing an eldritch phenomenon. Smoke thickened as Elias reached the next junction. A medic lay half-collapsed against the wall, coughing violently. Elias dropped to a knee. Can you move? And no, muscles, locking. Kyrex physiology froze under high carbon particulate density. Elias had read that in a handbook he was told humans wouldn't need. He hoisted the medic up, slinging the alien across his shoulders fireman carry style, an ancient human maneuver older than most interstellar civilizations. As he moved, the medic croaked, Why are you doing this? Elias shifted his grip. Someone helped me once. This seemed fair. He set the medic down safely near an evacuation unit and continued. Deck 7 was collapsing. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Bulkhead plates groaned. The central stabilizer pulsed violently, threatening a catastrophic gravitational inversion. Lyra's room was 3 halls ahead. He ran. At the final junction, a Kyrex lieutenant barred his way. Civilian! You are ordered to retreat. Elias sidestepped him, using a gentle shoulder check that nudged the larger alien aside without harming him. The lieutenant sputtered. You can't just. I'll apologize later. He reached Lyra's door as the ceiling cracked above. Without hesitation, he braced himself beneath the collapsing structure, using both arms to hold it just high enough to slide inside. Lyra sat huddled under an emergency shield, eyes wide with terror. When she saw him, she whispered, You came back. Seemed like a good habit. He crossed the room, scooped her into his arms, light as air, and carried her out just as the ceiling caved in behind them. He ran with her held securely against his chest, adjusting his steps instinctively to avoid debris, shifting weight mid-stride as the floor tilted under gravitational distortion. Lyra buried her face into his shoulder. Her small fingers clung desperately to his shirt. Humans were never designed for this kind of strain. And yet Elias ran like a man carrying little more than a bag of groceries. The stabilizer exploded behind them. Gravity convulsed. The hallway twisted sideways. The entire deck began to rotate. Alien screams echoed as bodies floated or slammed unpredictably into walls. Elias didn't scream. He adjusted. One hand on a railing, one arm securing Lyra, boots finding purchase in a chaos dance that no species manual had ever accounted for. He pushed off a wall at just the right angle, something impossible to teach, landed on a sideways corridor panel, gripped the next railing, and swung them through the airborne debris cloud. The world tumbled. He did not. Human perception didn't calculate angles. It felt them. Elias landed on the final ramp as gravity stabilized, then sprinted through the emergency barrier before the last seal shut. He set Lyra down gently. You okay? He asked. Her eyes shimmered. You saved me, again. He smiled softly. Let's try to avoid a trilogy. Behind them, Deck 7 collapsed fully, contained now, but crippled. Rescue crews swarmed in as alarms faded. Medics flocked to Lyra. Engineers scrambled to analyze data. Officers barked orders. Through all of it, one truth spread like voltage. The humans saved her. The humans stabilized the deck. The humans survived what no one else could. Again. The gallery observers who had watched the emergency footage arrived minutes later, stunned into silence. Even Tlorin. Especially Tlorin. He stared at Elias as if looking at an equation that refused to resolve. How? He whispered. How did you navigate that? Elias wiped soot from his cheek. Good reflexes. Bad childhood playgrounds. Lyra began to laugh through shaky breaths. A small, fragile sound. But alive. The gallery absorbed the moment in crystalline clarity. This was no anomaly. No statistical error. No fluke. It was human nature. Tone and emotional weight matched to HFY reference endings. Hours later, the vast meridian floated in uneasy silence, its wounded deck sealed behind shimmering quarantine fields. Emergency drones drifted through the outer hull as the ship's gravity slowly stabilized. The chaos had passed, but the echo of it lingered in every corridor, especially in the tribunal chamber. This time, the benches were quiet. The gallery watched Elias enter not with curiosity, but with something closer to reverence, or perhaps bewilderment held carefully in both hands. Lyra walked beside him, wrapped in a silver medical cloak, her frilled ears drooping in exhaustion yet lifted whenever she glanced at the human. Her steps remained unsteady, but she refused assistance from anyone except him. High Assessor Tlorin stood at the center of the dais, posture stiff, crest dimmed, not in defeat, but in dawning realization. This was no longer a tribunal. This was a reckoning. We reconvene. Florence said softly, so softly the Kyrex attendants glanced at him in surprise. By Dominion law, the events on Deck 7 must be documented for historical accuracy. He cleared his throat. Let the record state, the human Elias Renner's actions prevented a collapse that would have taken 120 lives. The Brakva rumbled respectfully. The Vorati glowed faintly. The Avrian bowed their heads. Florin pressed the sequence that projected the emergency footage, grainy, distorted from gravitational turbulence. It showed Elias rescuing the medic, Elias stabilizing the collapsing ceiling, Elias carrying Lyra while gravity flipped, Elias navigating a tumbling hallway as though born for it. When the footage ended, the silence felt sacred. Florin spoke again, voice unsteady. I reviewed our metrics, he admitted. I reviewed your neural latency, your bone fragility, your heat tolerance, and your biological inefficiencies. None of it explains your survival. Elias shrugged lightly. Humans improvise. Improvise? Florin repeated, tasting the unfamiliar shape of the word. A term that is statistically meaningless. Works pretty well, Elias offered. That earned the faintest ripple of laughter across the chamber. Florin continued. Our models assumed that stability was strength. That predictability was control. That optimization was superiority. His crest lowered. It appears we miscalculated. The admission struck the gallery like thunder. Kyrek's philosophy was built on infallible logic. For an assessor to admit error was unthinkable. Lyra stepped forward timidly. Her voice was soft but carried the weight of someone who had finally been heard. He did not save me because I was valuable, she said. He saved me because I was alive. Many species shifted, suddenly unable to meet her gaze. Elias glanced at her, eyes gentle. I'd do it again. Florin inhaled slowly, as if bracing for a blow only he could see. Human Elias Renner. He hesitated. Then he bowed. Not a Kyrex superiority bow. Not symbolic authority. A bow of respect. We request permission, he said quietly, to revise Dominion rescue doctrine using human methodologies, including improvisational reflex algorithms and emotional prioritization. Parameters. A gasp rippled through the gallery. Aliens turned to Elias with expressions ranging from awe to disbelief. The Vorati shimmered a soft gold. The Avrian fluffed their feathers. The Brakva thumped a formal salute against their armored chest. Elias blinked. Sure. Sounds useful. Florin exhaled with visible relief. It is unprecedented, he murmured. But necessary. One of the attendants added timidly. We would also appreciate human consultation on environmental chaos training and structural improvisation, said a Vorati. And emotional prioritization modeling, chirped an Avrian. And falling while running navigation strategies, added a Brakthar. Elias rubbed the back of his neck. We just call that childhood. Lyra let out a tiny laugh, bright and fragile. Florin straightened to his full height. At this time, he declared formally, the Dominion recognizes the human's actions as exemplary. Furthermore, Lyra's classification is hereby elevated to protected individual under diplomatic care. Shock rippled through the room. Elevation of a low-value member was effectively a political apology. Lyra's breath hitched. She looked up at Elias, eyes shining. You changed everything, she whispered. Elias tilted his head. Did I? She nodded. Not with strength. With choosing. Elias shrugged gently. Someone had to. And in that simple sentence, the galaxy heard the quiet, unshakable heart of humanity. After the tribunal dispersed, the corridor outside dimmed to twilight mode. Engineers hurried past with diagnostic tools. Medical drones hummed overhead. The chaos of the day still vibrated faintly through the ship's metal bones. Elias leaned against the transparent wall overlooking the drifting stars. Lyra stood beside him, small and quiet, wrapped in her silver cloak like a newly hatched thing unsure of its place in the world. You don't feel fear the way others do, she said, studying him. He smiled softly. I feel it. I just don't let it drive. She turned her gaze toward the windows. The Dominion believed humans were weak. Still do, Elias said. For now. She hesitated. Why did you help me? Twice? He considered the question as if tasting each word. Because someone should, he answered simply. And answering that should never require a title, a rank, or a calculation. Lyra's ears lowered in quiet thought. Across the hall, Clorin approached slowly. His posture held a reverent wariness, as if nearing an animal that looked gentle but had lifted entire civilizations without raising its voice. Human Elias Renner, he said, I have reviewed the footage many times. Your movements inside the collapsing deck defy even expanded models. We cannot replicate them. Elias gave a small, apologetic shrug. Probably for the best. Clorin exhaled. Explain one thing, then. What was your guiding principle? What algorithm did you follow? Elias pushed gently off the wall, stood upright, and looked directly at the assessor. No algorithm, he said. Just instinct. Clorin swallowed. And what do humans call this instinct? Elias's smile was almost too soft to see. Doing the right thing. He stepped past the Kyrex, hands in his pockets, Lyra following close behind. Clorin watched him go, understanding, finally, that the most dangerous species in the galaxy had never needed claws, armor, or superior biology. Just choice. And as the door closed behind Elias, the assessor whispered the truth the galaxy would soon learn. They weren't strong because we underestimated them. They were strong because they never needed to prove anything.